Okay, welcome. Here is the agenda. If you're on YouTube and you can hear us, let us know. Great. So we'll go ahead and get started with Kiln office hours, as we've done in the past many meetings. Perry, can you get us started with testnet topics? And then Mikhail, you can tell us about Kiln v2, and then we can have open discussion from there.
Sure. So Merge DevNet 2 was launched late last week. We should have all client teams participating now. I think Bezu's still doing internal testing, but yeah, they should be done relatively soon. We're seeing something like 99.7% participation rate. I think that's even just a rounding error from the beacon chain part, or probably as high as it goes. Marius raised a point, however, that we're only seeing 80% sync aggregate participation, and it's relatively stable at that number. So it could be that some clients aren't partaking. Not sure why. Maybe some client teams can look into their notes and let us know if we need to change some config, or if that's a known issue.
It definitely sounds like because it's so stable, it sounds like a particular set of validators that we could probably very easily see that set.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, just need to dig into that issue yet. I think that's about it from the testnet updates. I'd like to, I don't know if we want to talk about Kiln v2 first or talk about the public Kiln testnet. Which order do we want to go in?
Public Kiln would be the iteration of the devnets that turn into the testnet.
Yes. So I'd like to maybe in chat, if all the client teams can just type in if you guys feel that you're ready or if you need some more time. In general, I'm thinking about launching the testnet on like the beginning of next week, maybe Tuesday, if that works for everyone.
We got at least one not ready in that in the chat.
Just to clarify, this would be Kiln v1, not Kiln v2. So you need to have Kiln v1 spec implemented, which is the same as Merge DevNet 4.
And the plan there is to make it a more public thing, but to still do a Kiln v2 testnet, or to migrate this over to v2.
I was thinking that we just do a migration later once everyone's ready, so that we don't have to rush it, but we still have a newer testnet that people can start deploying things to.
You mean the newer persistent one, the Kiln one, right?
Exactly. But yeah, there's two ways of going at it. Either we wait for everyone to get ready with v2 and then we launch the public testnet directly with v2, or we launch it with v1 and upgrade it mid-cycle.
Mikhail, can you go ahead and talk about Kiln v2 and anything that is coming out of that might make that difficult or not?
Yeah, so trying to understand whether the upgrade is going to be smooth or not. Okay, so for v2 we have like two things in general, like two major things. The first one is authentication, and another one is this new exchange transition configuration endpoints. Other than that, we have renamed a random opcode to pre-readiness, and there are a couple of related PRs to engine API and consensus specs. So they're just basically renaming the stuff, the field from random to pre-readiness to reflect this change in the EIP. So
that's one of, because that makes it into the engine API. So that actually, when upgrading, would have to be handled with care and handled on both sides of a client combo, whereas most of the other things could be handled probably transparently.
Right. So yeah, authentication, as we decided to to keep an authenticated port for a while, so it should be smooth. Then this new ping functionality is also like not a requirement for the general use cases of Engine API. So it's just on top of that. It can be like enabled at any point in time when EL client supports, EL client starts to support it widely. Yeah, but this renaming probably the one thing that is not backward compatible.
And so if we were to move forward and just wanted to be on the safe side, getting a renaming done before we move forward might remove some of the other headaches we might have in the future. But it does look like in the chat we have a lot of readies, and what I interpreted as a not ready was maybe just an exclamation point of excitement.
Yes, super excited.
Yeah, sorry. I read that as not.
Yeah. I already, like we also started implementing V2 and should be good with it. So we tested JWT support, and that was fine. And I added the new method, but I still need to test it.
Right. Is when people say they're ready, does that mean they're ready with authentication? What's the state of authentication?
Tech is ready for V2, including authentication, and we also deal with backward compatibility in just an option by command line. So transitioning between V1 and V2 will be simply restarted with a different option there. And yeah, that's for Tech.
Thank
For
you.
Prism, we have authentication implemented, but we need to test it still. So yeah.
Lodestar is ready for JWT auth as well. Our authentication is working in CI with GET. Basically, our CI has
Right.
a test run for working well with. Yep.
At that point, we implemented exchange transition, and one of our team members tested authentication with Lodestar, and it is working fine. However, we need to do some changes in authentication code and add WebSocket support.
So I see a bit of a range on the authentication being ready, but very close. Would there be a tangible difference in doing Monday versus Wednesday? Any opinion here? Or are we all just ready? Let's do Monday. Okay.
Will this renaming be ready by? Basically, we what should be done is just renaming the structure that is used for Engine API communication on both sides, I guess. Inner consensus layer renaming, maybe not related. It's not gonna be backwards and compatible for the communication between clients.
Right, you can technically name that whatever you want. Yeah, is that renaming of random to pre-Withdrawal done on the Engine API?
We haven't done the renaming at Lighthouse.
Yeah, we did it, and we actually internally work with always the latest names, but we change at runtime only the API's naming to be backward compatible if we need to behave the old way. So we all in the REST API, for instance, we expose prev rundown always. but in the engine API, we use random for V1 and Kintsugi.
We haven't done the renaming yet, but it shouldn't take too long to do that.
Okay, so we're probably a bit mixed on the name, which the name will break things on the engine API. If we do this Tuesday or Wednesday, can we all be conformant on that name?
Be fine for Lighthouse. We'll probably stop supporting Kintsugi because we don't really have the ability to swap the API names based on testnets.
Which I think is okay.
So sorry, we're renaming parts of the engine API, right? Is this in V2?
This is in a PR that was noted and in V2 as of yesterday, I believe, Mikhail.
Yep, it's in V2. It's in the change set.
Okay.
So it's also included in the latest release of Engine API. So it's now in the release. Before that, it was like a standalone PR on top of the release. So anyway, it's in the spec, and it's very tiny.
Yes, I thought, but I thought Perry said we wanted to target. I thought Perry said we wanted to target V1 for merge for Kiln. No, going to do V2. No.
V2, other than this name change, can be kind of done over time because of the way that the API port has the old one. So this is the only thing that would make V1 and V2s not be able to talk to each other. So I would suggest that everyone just does the name change now, because otherwise we're gonna have a headache. Name changes at this point are headaches, but that API or that EIP around random had the name change, so it was best to probably ripple it everywhere. Okay, so I think Tuesday with name change rather than Monday with uncertainty around name change, or Wednesday if that's what people need.
I think that should work. On Monday, I can just reach out to everyone and maybe just collect some information so we know if we're ready by Tuesday. Worst case, we delay to Wednesday. I'll try and get the configs out on Monday as well. So in case anyone's doing a last minute release, they can just include the config in to make it easier to run clients. And besides that, does anyone else want to run validators, Genesis validators? If you do, then please reach out. Otherwise, we just follow the same principle as previous times. I just keep some validator keys aside for testing, but all basically the validator load would be handled by the EF.
Sounds good. So, Perry, in your estimation, what are the chances that as this upgrades to V2, this is what we stand up and tell, via blog post and otherwise for people to come test and join? That's the intention here.
Yeah, I guess we repeat everything we've done for Kintsugi in terms of outreach. So we get all the tooling up, update all the joining documents, and ask people to redeploy their contracts and test on Kiln, I guess.
Got it.
So what would be really nice would be to have a longer period of proof of work before the actual merge.
Yes,
So
I was thinking of just setting the difficulty like 100 times more than what we've done it so far. So rather than it being an evening, it'll probably take a few days.
That's great. And we can always spin up the old mining rig.
Exactly. We can spin up more mining rig if we feel like it's too high. Yeah.
Great. Very exciting. Andrew.
Yeah, so I'd like to clarify. So we all agree that we do the V2 renaming, right? In the
Yes.
testnet.
Yes.
And okay, that's my first question. That's fine. And the second question, what about the ports? Because I'm very confused about the which port should be authenticated and which port should not be authenticated. Can we clarify that? I agree on the ports.
Yeah, Mikhail, what's the latest on that? And I'll pull up the PR to take a look as well. I believe there are 2 ports, and one is auth and one is not auth.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, let me check. So was 8550, right? On authenticated one.
Great.
Yeah, and then our authentication, we have this, I don't know, 8551.
Right.
So that's probably like, I don't know how it's implemented by your clients, but I think it's reasonable port numbers as they are specified in the spec. So we'll just have this authentication port, and yeah, then we'll just decide which one to remove.
Yeah,
probably it would make sense. Yeah, to remove the one.
I think
not,
it's not what Geth has implemented, right? Geth has, or is it? Marius, could you confirm what's the plan?
So what we've implemented is auth on 8550, respectively 8551 for WS, for WebSockets. And well, the other one you can choose where you want to put it. But we also want to make we want to make both ports configurable, so you can run multiple nodes on your machine. And but that's not implemented yet.
Do you have an unauthenticated port right now supported in Geth?
No, we have the engine. So we have no unauthenticated version of the engine API. We only have the authenticated one.
Okay.
Because the spec Martin wrote, I believe, has unauth on 8550 and auth on 8551. Obviously, those are configurable. You can move them around, but to allow for backwards compatibility in the transition. But that is not the case in Geth.
In the implementation, no.
Okay.
Can you still hit the F endpoints on the authenticated endpoint, the port?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I have to look it up. But we provide the F endpoints on the unauthenticated port.
We use the F endpoints for getting blocks. So if we assume that we can get the engine and F endpoints on the same port. If we need to spread those across auth and unauth ports, it might be a bit more work on our end. Probably be a bit more work for the user as well in terms of specifying different endpoints.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We might also provide the S endpoint on the authenticated, but I have to look at the code.
Yeah, once again, I think it makes sense for real clients to follow the spec and use the numbers from the spec. Where
as good defaults for sure. I mean, overriding is one thing. Yeah. Okay, so Andrew, that the spec is in one state, Geth is in a slightly different state, but a configurable state. That's where it stands.
Okay, so we'll probably for the test net, we'll probably just maybe enable one non-authenticated port, which will be 8550, and then we'll add authentication later.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable path.
By the way, is any CL client yet not supporting authentication?
What was the question? Sorry, who not supporting auth?
Yeah, who is not supporting from CL clients? Which clients?
We're not supporting auth yet.
Okay, I missed that. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Maybe as we approach the weekend, we'll just throw a table up that has some of these, decisions or readiness, just so that Perry can gather the information to reduce the load and us not have to go back and forth on the call who has this, who has that, because that'll also probably change very soon.
By the way, we have milestones.
Sweet.
We might want to add V2 as a milestone.
Yeah, is it not in there?
Oh yes, it's there. So
let me check.
Yeah, it's here. I'm checking it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, these milestones still exist. I don't think everyone's using it, but it does help with visibility, especially for Perry and others configuring things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it could be a source of readiness.
Okay. Perry, thank you for coordinating the upcoming testnet. Please work with Perry if he knocks on your door. Are there anything else related to the testnet discussion as we prepare this week? Okay. Mikhail, is there anything else on V2 or anything else you'd like to discuss with respect to the spec?
Yeah, not related to Kiln, but related to beacon APIs, or we'll raise this later. I mean, just wanted to check with the state of this optimistic flag status.
Yeah, Paul, do you have an update on that one?
Yeah, so I think I need to fix some CI failures on my end, but I think Teku has made an issue indicating they're going to go ahead with it. We're going to go ahead with it. We haven't implemented it yet. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not sure if we have buy-in from anyone else yet, but I think it's kind of at the stage where no one's objecting to it. So I think that means it's going to happen.
Got it.
I just have the minor point we checked. The thing about the V2 versus V1. We checked the current client and we're actually strict on not allowing fields in there. So V2 would be slightly more user-friendly to support.
It's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of V2s.
Yeah, it kind of raises the question whether we should be ignoring what we consider to be an important security flag. And if it's not an important security flag, then why is it there, right? I mean, semantically, we are changing the meaning of the message, let's put it this way.
Should we talk about it on the PR?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Jump in there, V1 versus V2. Discussion to be had. Mikhail, and there's also an open PR to help better define the requisite ETH endpoints that need to be served over the execution, the engine API, right? And that'll probably come soon, and that would be not a change, but just a clarification.
Yeah, that's not gonna reflect. That's not require any engineering, I guess. Yeah. Also, there is a small clarification on this exchange transition configuration stuff. So, but it doesn't affect semantics.
Got it.
It's just saying that CL may not send this transition block number because it doesn't have this configuration setting. So that's basically it. Yeah. By the way, on the beacon APIs, I guess every CL client has updated structures, and the structures are including execution payload right now. But we need to reflect this in the spec, right? In the beacon API spec. Or is it already there?
I'm not up to date on that update. Does anybody know? All right. We can circle back and take a look at that.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Testing discussion. Kurtosis, which presented on All Core Devs on Friday about the simulation and automation framework that they've been working on to help with testing the merge. They're going to have a breakout tomorrow at 14 UTC, so at the same time as this call, but on Friday, and they're going to help people better understand what the tool can do, how you might think about using it for testing your client, maybe doing some CI integration, that kind of stuff. If you can send somebody who's working on testing on your side, I think it'd be valuable. It does maybe some things like Hive, but it also has its own special stuff it can handle. So come check it out. Any other testing items people want to discuss today? Are we planning on shadow forking Gorley with Kiln v2 once that kind of gets ready?
Yeah, that's the plan. We'd probably make it a bit semi-public, and people can use that for sync testing if they want.
Right. It might be useful also for people that want to test pre-merge configurations. For example, in Vero, testing the endpoint to see if the clients are configured properly and that kind of stuff.
Yep. If anyone has ideas for some automated tests we can run on shadow forking, please do contact me, Marius, someone. We would like some ideas.
Great. Any other things related to testing that people want to discuss on the call? Okay. Anything else related to the merge that people want to discuss on the call?
Yeah, just to mention that, as I said in this call, we will be evaluating the clients on the new the Kiln network, and I have already discussed with Barry to know what are the main most interesting benchmarking points, and we'll be contacting all the client teams for questions or to try to understand behaviors that we might find strange or something like that. Yeah, so just that.
Yeah, are you testing local clients' performance, or are you testing more network performance?
Local client performance.
Got it. Thank you, Leo. Okay, let's move on from the merge. Are there any other client updates people want to share today?
There is one update I'd quickly share about Nimbus. So we managed to implement both the client and server for Light Client Sync, which is pretty exciting. There's a PR open. There's a number of Light Client PRs open, so take a look at those. It's a little bit wonky, of course. The way it works is that you do the Light Client Sync dance, but you don't have a state. So what you do next is that you download a state via REST, and then you can verify that that state corresponds to whatever you arrived to as head with the Light Client Sync. So basically, it takes the trusted part out of the REST API. So you can just use the REST API to download anything and then validate it afterwards. It's
How do you bootstrap
nifty, actually.
The Light Client committee, though, trustlessly?
It's a good question. I didn't really check that part, so I'm not qualified to answer it. Right. What it does basically is that it replays the entire history of the chain. Oh no, the weak subjectivity sync history of the chain, and creates Light Client updates that can be distributed via libp2p, and then there are requests to fetch these Light Client updates. So you request them from anybody on the network, really, but right now only Nimbus, obviously. Then you process those, and you arrive at a finalized checkpoint, and then that finalized checkpoint can be used to verify whatever you download from anyone else. But I'm not 100% sure on the details, so I don't want to be speaking out of turn.
Cool. Okay. An update on Spec stuff is that we're very actively talking about the different designs for withdrawals. One of the big questions would be push versus pull within the execution layer. And then once you decide between one or the others, there's a number of other design considerations. It was interpreted that pull was the only viable route in the execution layer due to the specification of the 0x01 withdrawal credentials, which said pretty clearly that code execution would happen, or would be able to happen when the withdrawal landed, which would then entail gas and potential failures and other things like that, which can only really be handled in a sane way via pull. But we did do an analysis of the existing 0x01 withdrawal credentials on mainnet and didn't find anything today that is breaking if there's or that assumes this code execution. Thus, both push and pull are on the table, and there's a bit of favoring of push that would just do a database update, kind of like Coinbase, rather than the triggering of code. So both are under discussion. I'm doing 2 sample PRs on the consensus layer, both push and pull, and we'll continue to update y'all there.
I have a small comment on that. I think push is really, if we have this logic verifying that these withdrawals that are included in the execution payload are valid, if we do this on the consensus layer side, it will be just, up to, for EL clients, it will be better off topping up the balance of a certain address and doing it in a cycle. So it's not like a huge complexity. Also, one thing that's probably worth considering here is that we could discern withdrawal operation from application layer transactions. So it will be just another list in the execution block probably omers could be used for this purpose. So that's to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I think the path would be to instead define a special transaction type and some rules around it, and using that to pass it in the body rather than putting in the omers, but passing it and doing the validation that they are correct and that the exact number that you want in there are correct can be done on the consensus layer.
You mean including them in the same list of transactions?
Correct, but having some validation rules, like they must be at the header, the head, only, call them type 10 transactions, only, in the consensus layer. You could put them in SSE so the consensus layer can validate that they are in fact correct, and that those are the only type 10 transactions in the block.
Yeah. The more complex implementation on the EL side would be to verify the proof, link it to the beacon block root. This if we want less coupling between EL and CL, but probably if we want this in the future, we can do this in the future. I mean, this less coupling.
Yeah, my intuition is, if we were going to go with push, that this isn't even that bad of a coupling. It's just an additional consensus layer rule where things are dequeued from a queue, and it's ensured that they're properly inserted into the block. But there's some open questions around transactions in the execution payload and how they're typed with the union or not. Proto?
There is also option between push and pull, where push is effectively used to update some type of system contract, minting the ETH for the withdrawals, and possibly updating some type of route of the withdrawal receipts, but not necessarily directly executing the withdrawals. It can still complete with a pull, and that way we avoid the complexity of having to do this minting and these other things outside of a transaction.
I'm not sure I followed, but yeah, you could update a system contract and then people could pull the ETH out of it. But at that point, why not instead update the end balances rather than rather than requiring this additional
does allow the pool-based design, which basically avoids the risk of a transaction failing when withdrawing to a contract.
I see. Yeah, so you push the ETH into a staged place and then people can pull it out. I mean, that's essentially what any pull design looks like, right? Which is exposing something in the EVM that people can pull out of, which can be a root or could be a more sophisticated construction. Anyway, we're gonna have a series of some stuff to engage with, PRs and proto EIPs and stuff to chat about. Danko and Aditya.
Do you want to go?
Yes,
I can share screen if that helps.
Okay, if you want, yeah. Cool. So I just shared it in the chat. Aditya and we have been working on. I mean, I already gave an earlier presentation and wrote some posts, but we now, I think, hashed out a good version of the safe block confirmation rule that we're quite confident in. And I think, like, yeah, Aditya, I can see it. That is. Yeah, we would like to share it, especially to get some feedback on the implementation from the client side. We think that most of the things are easy to implement and largely based on things we already have, but we should see if maybe that's not true and if we need to do anything about that. Okay, so as a reminder, so we want to introduce this rule that we as the latest what's currently the latest block in the execution engine, we don't expose like the very tip of the fork choice rule, but we expose what's called a safe head, and that's a block that we reasonably expect will not be reorged if even under normal attack scenarios. And the reason for that is that the tip might be extremely unsafe the way that Ghost works now, because a proposer can balance their block. They can propose it at a time where 50% of our testers see it and 50% don't, and there are several similar attacks that are based on similar things, and so that makes the tip potentially more untrustworthy than it is even in proof of work right now. This can easily be fixed because we actually have all the information to know whether such an attack is taking place, and so we can easily secure clients from ever trusting such a tip, and that's a very useful property for many things. So that's both very good for users that will have a safe way of knowing whether the transaction was confirmed within 8 seconds only of like the block being proposed, so that's not a long time at all. And it's also a great advantage for anyone who's doing bot or MAV stuff, because they want to know if the next block actually is going to be secure, and because otherwise they run into the risk that their own block will be reorged and they might lose the MAV and there someone else might exploit it and so on. Okay, so the way it works, you basically make an assumption that the adversary controls less than 50% of the stake. Well, that's uncontroversial. The major one is that we assume that the network is synchronous and the maximum delay is less than 4 seconds. So that's the major assumption that is behind coming up with such rule. Clearly, if you don't have a synchronous network, then no block without an FFG confirmation can ever be safe. And we further assume that the adversary is willing to get B validator slashed or B the stake of B validators. Yeah, that's not the amount of stake that is that's not the total amount of the penalty, but the total amount of stake that is involved in a slashing. Okay.
What do you mean by synchronous?
Synchronous means all messages are seen by all validators within 4 seconds. So that means if I say in aggregate attestation, then I assume after 4 seconds the whole network will have seen it. Okay, so there's some notation here. So how should we do this, Aditya?
I think let's leave the reading for async stuff, and we can just skip to what the end formula looks like and the algorithm to compute this, because that's more that's where we need input from clients.
But before we have to introduce the VB things, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So let's go to the graphic
image.
maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, we introduce this this VBI notation. So if you see the green block there, that's B, and VB counts votes that are in support of this block, or the chain of this block. Okay, and so how does this work? So the way the index is at which for so is indexing the chain of B, or yeah. So if it's 0, for example, that would be the genesis, and T is the height of B itself, and capital T is the latest block. And it should only count votes that are in support of B in some sense. And what that means is that if it's a descendant of B, then we want to count all the votes, because all these votes, even if they're not on the currently winning chain, do support B. They will fix B and will make it harder to reorg B itself. However, if we look at the ancestors of B, then then the height of B itself, then it's slightly different, because anything that's a vote here and that is not directly a vote for a block, like directly a vote for an ancestor of B, can actually be used to reorg B out of the fork choice. And so we don't want to count these. So that's why the orange blocks here, the votes for these shouldn't be counted, even though they do support, say, the height 0 and 1. And so if you evaluate, there are two examples here. If you evaluate VB0, you actually sum all the votes. So to reply to Mika, they are absolute. I think they're stake the way we designed it, right? So they would be the stake. So if you want to evaluate VB0, you basically sum everything except the orange one. So that's the support at the origin for the chain that includes B. But some of these will not be votes for B itself, but just votes for ancestors of B. And we'll come later to why that is important, why we need to count these. And then there is VBT, which is the other one that's important. That are all the votes at height small t, and these count. That's basically just the fork choice weight of B in this case. So that would count the votes for B and the votes for all the children and children's children and so on of B. Cool. Okay, let's go down to the algorithm. So where do we have the formula itself, the unsimplified formula? Aditya, can you scroll to that? Maybe that's above. Here, yeah. So basically, in order to compute whether a block is a safe head, you need to evaluate this formula. And to clarify, this is iterative. So B is a safe head if this formula holds at B and the parent of B is a safe head. So you have to evaluate it from the latest justified block. You have to do it like for every block. You have to ask, is this a safe head? You have to evaluate this formula. And if true, then you can continue to its child. And so what you do is you have VBT, that's all the support for the block B, plus VB0. So that's all the support, everything that's in support of the chain of B at Genesis, or actually it would be at the latest justified block. And then you have T minus T plus 1. So that's basically counting the number of blocks after T, and times W is the community size. So that's the total potential votes that you could have at the height. Minus WP, that's the proposer boost. And minus B, that's the total amount that the validator is willing to, said the attacker is willing to get slashed. So that's the formula. It's maybe Aditya, maybe stay there for now. So I guess the VBT, we already have that. That's the actual vote. That's the normal stake weight. So that should be easy to get for any client. VB0 is the one. So the reason we need VB0 is this counts the number of votes that that aren't directly voting for B, but also can't be used to reorg B. So the way this whole formula works is think about what is the best possible chain that an attacker can construct using all the missing votes. And the votes that are somehow in support of the chain of B, however, are not directly voting for B, they are important because they can at least not be used to attack B. So that's why this number is important. However, it's not currently available in clients as far as I know. So we came up with a way of potentially computing this without too many changes and too much effort. So we have this algorithm here that goes into the details on how all these are computed. And so the thing about VB0, I think the best way we came up with for this is that actually most of VB0 can be approximated by just taking VB_1. That counts all the votes that are 16 second, like at most 16 seconds late. And that's probably in reality, it's most people who are not on the very latest tip will have missed at most one block. So that's a pretty good approximation. And to be clear, that makes it strictly safer. So if you this will only have false negatives in a way, so it will never.
Actually, Dunker, I think we made a mistake somewhere. So VB T-1 should only count votes from committees in these slots. So the proto-array thing would not do this. It would count votes from the slot T-1 also. But yeah, I can just describe what the problem is. So we want to get, so I'm asking, is B safe or not? And I want to know how many votes from the committees in slots T, small t, all the way up to the tip. How many votes from committees in these slots vote for anything that's an ancestor of B? So direct ancestor. These orange votes don't count. And I think a good approximation for this is you only see how many votes from committees from slot T to capital T vote for the block before B. Because unless there's crazy latency going on, the committees from block B slot or higher are not going to vote for some like high ancestor of B. They'll probably vote for just the parent of B. And so we need to extract this from proto-array somehow, maybe cache some values. I'm not sure how to do this. We need your input here.
So point being is there's engineering questions around if this algorithm can be efficiently implemented using the data that's already in proto-array, right?
Yep, that's right.
And are those questions succinctly written down somewhere in this document?
Yeah, this should be covering the questions, but I'll also make it explicit. I'll edit it to ask the questions more clearly.
Okay, cool. I would share the document and then maybe contact one or two client team directly with the question and see if it can be tractably solved, and then formulate how to solve it from there. Is that a reasonable strategy?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm Paul here. I'm happy to help with this one as well. It's 2 a.m. here though, so I'm pretty slow, so it won't be helpful until tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
There's also a second question that we should maybe mention, so just so that we have them all listed on the justification.
Yeah, so to check if just a checkpoint block is safe, you not only need to do this. So what we described here is basically LMD accounting. We are asking if there is any world where LMD votes for competitors of B outweigh the support for B. For checkpoint blocks, which are in the chain of B, you need to do something special, because not only do LMD votes matter, but also the FFG ones. So you can get rug pulled on what your best justified checkpoint is, and then the LMD votes don't really matter anymore. So the way to do this is every checkpoint block in B's chain. So every checkpoint block that's an ancestor of B, you check that it got 1/3 plus the attacker's fraction of FFG votes. If that's the case, because of the quorum intersection argument, no other checkpoint at that height is going to get justified. So that's a necessary and sufficient condition. And this also requires some special accounting in the clients.
Right, so this requires for every checkpoint block for every epoch since justification that there's a cumulative vote count that is accessible, right?
Right. And
FFG vote count, to be clear. It's
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do the clients cache this somehow anyways?
I believe that clients, when they're in epoch n, many of them keep some sort of like pre-compute about, or at least cache, once they've called it once, about the running justification or the running total participation from a source target standpoint for that epoch. But I don't know if after epoch n or after epoch n+1 if that's still available.
I see. Yep. So in the ideal case, if the computations are already happening, we can just push them in memory and take the hit there.
Yeah, let's circle back with Paul in the next 24 hours with some concrete questions pulled out of this thing.
I'm not sure I understood the question exactly, but we do cache every finalized and justified checkpoint until finalization happens. So for all rounds that we know of.
Yeah, this would be before justification. We are asking if it has a little more than 1/3 support.
So basically a running count of the current support of any FFG checkpoint after the current justified one.
After meaning more recently in time.
Yes.
Which usually is an epoch, but can be arbitrary depth. And then the question is, can you easily get that information?
Not sure. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I make the claim that during epoch n or at the end of epoch n in n+1, the information is known. And so if you don't justify, that could be stored if it was not. And then you can run this algorithm. But so it's not there's not a massive technical complexity here, but it might not just come off the shelf for free if the data structure isn't storing that information, which I don't necessarily see why it would.
Well, I think the problem here is that we actually, for justification, we use the state transition. We don't count the running votes. Like to decide that when we basically look at the head and then we count whatever was included there, more or less. It's not exactly that, but
right.
More or
less. So that logic internally does a vote count, right? So do you do that just online? Do you then just count the votes, or do you have that number cached somewhere? Like the state transition logic right now, the way it's specified, it just counts the votes. But is that how it actually does it, or do you cache that?
That's the way it actually does it.
Okay. So
yeah,
you
well,
actually
I think in most clients there's a call, get the attester count for some target, and that call is cached, meaning once they call it once, you can call it over and over again at constant time. But I don't know if there's like a running total throughout that epoch. And that cache would then be dropped, once you move into a later epoch, likely.
One potential way to implement it is to simply cache this number when you call that function, and then just store that number and don't even worry about updating it, because likely it's not going to increase much anyway. And this is probably fine. Like again, that would be an optimization which makes it strictly safer, like is less likely to return a safe head, but I would say that would be
well, I don't even know if it's strictly less, just because on the epoch transition of n+1, if you then know you then know the max on that chain that you're going to see for n, I guess you could see other chains that would potentially increase it. But yeah, during that state transition, you're probably seeing the max, the general max. Yeah, so it is a little bit. I see.
But that's fine. I
Yeah,
mean,
so-
I think I would be perfectly happy if just doing that that state transition call where you count the tally of, I think, the previous and current epoch, if you just store those numbers and just use those forever for that epoch.
So it's a very tractable problem. It's still a matter of like exactly where in the engineering you grab it, what exists today, and that kind of stuff.
I guess I noticed there is another question here that we maybe skipped over a little bit. So I think in order to make this work, those what we call blocks here are actually have to include empty slots. So you have to evaluate the set empty slots as well. I guess that would be another question if that is doable for clients.
Right now, I believe proto-array constructions are generally just the blockchain and are not doing anything with empty slots. Is that correct?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
I see. Yep.
Okay, let's take this into discussion over the next few days out of the call. Thank you, Aditya and Dankara. Okay. Any other discussion points? Research, spec, otherwise? Anything at all?
This past weekend, with the Eve Denver crowd, we have prepared a prototype of the data blob transactions. This overlaps with both the consensus layer as well as the execution layer. We're preparing an EIP, and then in the coming weeks, this will also involve consensus layer work, and I will keep you all up to date.
Sweet. And is there a document on the work that you can share, or is that not in a very good shareable state?
At the end of the hackathon, we did prepare this document outlining the changes of the spec of the execution layer prototype as well as the consensus layer prototype. I'll share that in the chat.
Sweet. Sounds good. Yeah, I think we're good, Perry. We can shut down those Paramount nodes. Well, actually, it would be interesting to see if there were any like weird load things that emerged, but not super critical. Okay, and a final reminder: kurtosis testing breakout room tomorrow at 14 UTC. Okay, thank you. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks all.
So
Thanks, Johnny. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.